met last Tuesday, the 23rd of April 2013, and coming out of that meeting, head of the Presidential Secretariat and Secretary to the Cabinet, Dr. Roger Luncheon, will bring you highlights on a number of matters Cabinet wished to bring to the public's attention through you, the media, after which we will entertain questions on your opening statement and, if time permits, on any other topical matter. I'll hand you over to Dr. Luncheon.
Thank you, Kwame, and we barely made it for good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the media. Let me apologize also for the late start. To advise you that Cabinet met on the 23rd, and arising from that meeting, these are the matters I'll be bringing to your attention. Cabinet, Budget 2013, snippets, Cabinet snippets, the diplomatic roundup, and the Girls in ICT 2013 Symposium. Allow me to start as usual with contracts for which Cabinet offered. Cabinet granted its no objections. In public works, the supply and installation of a PLC system for the retractor acceptor span of the Demerara Harbor Bridge. A PLC system, its supply and installation for the retractor acceptor span, the Demerara Harbor Bridge, and that award, 57,200 euros. 57,200 euros. The second, in the educational sector, the purchase of laptops for the Guyana Improvement Teachers Education Project, GTEP, and that award, 29.8 odd million Guyana dollars. 29.8 odd million Guyana dollars. Those are the contracts for which Cabinet granted its no objections that I wanted to bring to your attention. Budget 2013. The events of the previous day's debates of the estimates 2013 have merely served to confound those attempting to discern logic in the decisions of the opposition parties in Parliament. At times, a sense of sanity, level-headedness prevailed, but that was often extinguished by subsequent decisions by the same opposition political parties. The opposition pledges for their decisions on the estimates for budget agencies to be guided by answers provided by government ministers have been essentially honored in the breach. The NCN, the GINA appropriations were cut with nary a question asked, while it would have to be assumed that the answers to the many penetrating questions by the opposition preserved the allocations in the uncut ministerial sectors. How then does one explain the GPL cut, and then more recently, on Tuesday, the treatment of the Ministry of Public Works and their program that saw the rejection of financing of its program for CJIA expansion, GCAA, the Ogle Aerodrome, Hinterland Airstrip rehabilitation. How can one explain the cuts of Wednesday that would deny funding for the major infrastructure projects so crucial for the nation's development? The adoption of the Appropriation Bill 2013 has averted other outcomes, but it has merely provided a basis for further contentions in and outside of Parliament. Cabinet snippets. Diplomatic roundup, Switzerland. Cabinet approved the grant of its agreement for the appointment of Her Excellency Mrs. Sabine Ullman Shahaban as the non-resident ambassador extraordinaire and plenipotentiary of Switzerland to the Republic of Guyana. The ambassador will be resident in Caracas. Cabinet also approves the grant of its agreement for the appointment of His Excellency Lino Pupo do Paulo as the resident ambassador extraordinaire and plenipotentiary of the Federative Republic of Brazil to the Republic of Guyana. Commissioning of the Home for the Homeless. Monday, May the 6th, 2013 is the proposed date for the commissioning of the completed Home for the Homeless in Region 5. You may recall that the late President Hugo Chavez made incisive interventions in financing the construction of this home. It is proposed that the home be named in the honor of the late President, and the formal title would be the Home for Rehabilitation and Reintegration, as the policy would be for the residents there to be provided with a wide range of services to enable them to usefully re-enter society. ICT, girls in ICT. This ITU-sponsored annual event is being celebrated in Guyana, and the highlight would be the symposium that is being held today, April the 25th, at the Guyana International Convention Center. The Prime Minister is delivering the feature address, and at that time it is expected that the Prime Minister would confirm the dedication and essentially the rededication of the government of Guyana to ICT as an important tool, an important instrument for the economic development of Guyana. Girls in ICT is being undertaken with our international and national stakeholders to ensure that the dividends from ICT development in Guyana goes beyond the standard male domination. Ladies and gentlemen, those are the matters I wanted to bring to your attention. As I was leaving my office, I did say time. I said to myself, time was of the essence, but so eagerly have you waited for this press briefing. I couldn't help but reciprocate by having our session extend beyond matters in my opening statement and to extend it to topical matters of your choice. Thank you.
Okay.
Now, production of the PLC system, how will it boost the operations of the Demerara Harbor Bridge?
It replaces, I am advised at Cabinet, an existing system that has been installed decades ago, whose functioning has not indeed been keeping up with the rigorous demands of traffic, opening and closing of the bridge. And what is being done is a dismantling, a total removal of the old obsolete system and its replacement by a modern PLC system. The firm, I'm understanding that a firm, a Dutch firm, its engineer has been responsible all these years for maintaining the operation, maintaining the functions of that retractor span, and that firm has indeed gotten the go-ahead to do the replacement of the existing retractor span apparatus.
Sir, Adam, laptop for Guyana, the teachers improvement.
GTIP.
No, we have laptops in the system, the OLPF, and we're spending a lot of money on that. Wasn't it feasible that we divert some of these laptops from the OLPF into the teacher program, rather than spending a $29.8 million?
It's not an unworthy observation, if I might say so, but the GTIP program was designed in keeping with the administration's resolve to establish in all of the secondary schools ICT labs. And it logically followed that teachers would have to acquire those skills to give the optimum benefit from having ICT labs, computer labs in every high school across this country. So this is not a one-off. This process has its antecedent. We have spent similar or more money in previous years, both in acquiring laptops and, more importantly, in teaching, in giving teachers, ICT staff, the necessary skills to optimize the benefits of having ICT labs in secondary schools. Insofar as the computers are concerned, what is being provided to the teachers at CPC, I did not mention that this is where the training of the teachers who would be in the school system where these laboratories are located, the training would take place of the teachers in the secondary programs, in the CPC, the Cyril Potter College of Education, and the equipment, the laptops that they are using, they have enhanced specifications. It's not the same as those that are being used for the OLPF.
How many laptops will be procured for the 29.8 million dollars?
I couldn't answer that, but as I'm saying to you, this is not a one-off. This is an annual activity that every year teachers who are in the secondary program and are going to graduate into the secondary school system and are going to be specifically trained to have optimum benefit from the laboratories, the ICT labs in the school system, those teachers will acquire this knowledge. I am assuming that most of the secondary program, the teachers in the secondary program at CPC would be reaching out and acquiring these skills. Because it's fairly obvious it's not a skill isolatedly for school. This becomes a part and parcel of an individual intellectual achievements over the years and could be used to all and sundry, all other purposes. So I think that we are actually into training our school teachers in ICT and the technology for minimally their use in the school system, but understandably for their own intellectual and other achievements.
Any other question?
So,
Hold on.
On the same teacher laptop stuff, would the computers be similar to that of the OLPF, or would it be an advanced?
No, I want to believe that the design, I said the specifications are enhanced.
All right, are there any other questions?
No, I want to do one more on this home. So sometime back, when people were visiting, we had a program to remove pavement dwellers to place of refuge and all that kind of thing. And as a doctor, and so you would do some psychiatry and all that, you would have known that it isn't easy to have these people remain in any home regardless of what you do for them. So we built this home. Whom are we catering for?
These self-same homeless, the residents of the street, and I suspect from the shelter, because an interim intervention before the home for the homeless was conceived and completed was the shelter, which provides a temporary location. We thought it would be for the night to keep them off the streets. Those residents there, I am led to believe, would be en bloc, wholesale, transported to the Envoac Region 5 facility. And there they would be provided with the services I mentioned, that would allow them not to remain homeless, to make them re-enter society in a much more useful way.
So I can assume that we are going to have psychiatric help for them. I can also assume that there are going to be systems in place to keep them there. Because you know and I know that these people are going to walk away from any facility. Some of them would regardless.
Perhaps I should say the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. I don't believe that I can sit here and allow you to feel that this is a way of incarcerating the homeless and their residence here would be involuntary. That is totally out of keeping with the theory, with the philosophy, with our intentions. But I hear you, and I'm as familiar as you are with the lure of the street, and I think extraordinary efforts would have to be made to motivate the dwellers, the residents, to remain for whatever is the period of instruction before their return to their homes and return to the greater society.
Dr. Luncheon, at any one time, how many persons can this home accommodate?
I was told that there were about 100 and something places in the different chalets that constitute the design of the home, male and females. That, of course, is the mature situation, and it probably would start with smaller numbers, and as the response grows, more and more of the homeless would volunteer, as we anticipate, to remain there.
Has money been allocated for the functioning of this home already, and if so, how much?
No, well, that is, you ask a very important point, and the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security is concluding the preparation both of the recurrent budget, because the project itself provided funds for construction as well as funds for the equipment. The FFEs were provided for in the original sum allocated for construction. It is the recurrent costs. So staff, the organogram that has been approved that would serve in the facility, serve the residents in the facility. And we are working now on concluding the recurrent budget, the annual recurrent budget that would be needed when the facility is up and running.
Okay.
Questions outside?
Yes, you could go outside.
Okay, Dr. Luncheon, with the learning channel saying that they have to resort to TVG because it's the only channel with this uplink facility, could you say when was TVG actually issued the uplink license?
I would have imagined Minister Manikchan might have pronounced on those matters on the assumption that she didn't. I would probably have to make discrete inquiries to respond accurately to your question. But I could say this without fear of contradiction, that at the time when the service was provided and our intention to ensure that it was provided equitably across Guyana, at that very same time, or sometime close to then, the satellite uplink and downlink services had to be acquired. As I said in my contributions at a previous session, it was never intended to be incremental. It was never intended to provide the services across the coast where terrestrial linkages and terrestrial connectivity was assured, and then in some future date to move to the more distant regions. It was quite clear at Cabinet, President instructed that this is going to be rolled out as one.
Sorry. The TV uplink was there prior to, it was there in 2010, early 2010. Because there was a need, and it wasn't for learning channel. It was to provide the service when you get international cricket and international events, rather than these people bring in their big equipment. TVG would provide the service at a rate of between 10 million and 20 million a shot.
All right, I'm enlightened.
Now, this, he asked you, when was the license awarded, and you said it was rolled out in 2011.
When was the license for what?
Actually, satellite uplink.
For TLC. Which one?
TVG asked about.
Oh, I thought you were asking, well, I wouldn't know, you'll have to ask Bobby that. I wouldn't know that. I know for the purposes of the learning channel, when minimally we had to execute a contract for the provision of those services, that's when we were rolling out TLC. My assumption, which Adam has indeed confirmed, is that those services, uplinking and downlinking, were in existence. I don't know under what terms and conditions those contracts or the service was acquired, but they were apparently in place, used in international cricket and for other purposes, as he said. I know specifically, though, when the learning channel was being rolled out, we had to have those services.
Talisha? No, hold on, please. Hold. Talisha, you've been trying to get our attention. All right.
Yeah.
Sorry, Talisha, you changed your name? Yes, Talisha.
Dr. London, how confident are you, or how confident is the government that the opposition would revisit the cuts to the GPL allocations and even possibly reverse its decision?
I labored, and I suspect like many others, under the assumption that the reactions of stakeholders sending a powerful message to the parliamentary opposition with regards to GPL and the GPL cuts. I equally labored under the impression that what happened in the Ministry of Public Works was something that the opposition did not feel proud about and were busily assigning blame to others for that outcome. For me, those two led seamlessly to what would ordinarily be an effort to do something about it. If the stakeholders came out in force unsupportive of those cuts, and if those who did the cuts were now blaming others, at the end of the day, I felt the decent, the logical thing would have been undo it. I thought that the appropriation bill would have been the precise instrument to be used to effect some correction, some remedy of this situation. I am enlightened, I am advised that this was not possible. And so it is left to the parliamentary political parties, it is left to the architects, those who actually define, interpret parliamentary procedures, our laws, our constitution, to consider, to formulate options on the way forward, and to consider how those interventions would be made. I labor under the impression that the case has been made for interventions, that the case has been made for remedying that situation. It is essentially our resolve, the parliamentary political parties and the other stakeholders, our total resolve, how to go about remedying that situation.
Okay.
Dr. Luncheon, still on the budget.
Hold on. Please. We had, Mark, you still want to ask your question? You don't have to now pretend to be shy.
Yeah, Dr. Luncheon. Could you say if Ghana is a signatory to the International Telecommunications Satellite Organization operating agreement?
I wouldn't be able to answer that right now. I can certainly approach our technical people to get an answer to you soonest. International, write it down there. International Telecommunications Satellite Organization. Okay.
Radha, you had your hands up earlier? Okay, well, yes.
Yeah, Dr. Luncheon, the cuts for the expansion of the CJIA, what are some of the possible implications that this is likely to have on the administration's development plan?
Well, like the specialty hospital, there is one aspect, one that leaps to the fore, that we have to contend with. And that is, we do have legally binding obligations that we entered into. And therefore, mechanisms again will have to be resorted to, and hopefully not the worst case scenario, but mechanisms will have to be resorted to. See if we could undo, if we could minimize, either undo, which deals with restoration, or minimize, which means to have agreements with contracted parties that take into consideration the loss of financing, the withdrawal of financing for these projects. But your question is much more important. It moves beyond the handling of legal obligations that are now being threatened. It's the real impact on developmental planning. It's the impact on developmental planning. And I can give you just one brief review, one brief thinking that deals with contemporary events. You see this four-lane highway, the rehabilitation of the road to the airport and its four-lane extension, they weren't predicated on the existence, the continued existence of the current CGIA and the capacity that it offers right now. That work and the work that is being done in developing the transportation means was allied to the development and the expansion of CJIA. And this is what we talk about when we speak about economic development, and not trying to do it unnecessarily sequential. Some might want you to feel that we do the expansion and then after the hordes of cars and traffic and increased capacity, then we would be thinking about looking after four-lane highway and expanding the transportation means. No, that is not about planned development. And so along with the CGIA expansion has been put in place those concomitant aspects: road transport development, road transport improvement. All of that, all of those developmental initiatives are now minimally stalled in terms of the optimum, achieving the goals that CGI expansion offered, and indeed start asking the question, begging the question, if you lose the main driver, what happens to these subsequent and subordinate events?
The news of the cuts, do you think that this would in any way influence investors' confidence into the local aviation sector?
It can't help but doing so. I think the average investor speaks about the climate and he speaks about opportunity. And both have been affected by these cuts, both of them. And this is why I continue to labor under the impression that concerted efforts are and will be made to either undo or to mitigate the impact of these cuts, particularly when they involve these transformative projects that have been created, their initiatives to improve and to enhance economic development in Guyana.
Okay. All right, yes.
Dr. Luncheon, with the new GGMC's office and the Natural Resources Ministry now taking on president there, could you say how soon could we see GGMC being relocated, since they recently brought that in to deal with the issue of space and so forth?
I don't know why you said it recently built. The construction has not been completed, but I'm happy that you are aware of intentions. The High Street property, formerly the GBC, has been identified as the future home for GGMC, and in the context, of course, of the explosion in the growth in the natural resources sector, the economic development in the natural resources sector, one could anticipate that the brick dam premises has really outlived its capacity, even with the new building that is then put down there. So the acquisition of that High Street site was indeed strategic. And our understanding is funding has been made available to complete the construction, subsequent to which major elements of GGMC would be transferred to that location. I can anticipate you would be asking when, and I think you may have to speak to the GGMC, the professionals, the management of GGMC, to get a feel for what their projections are when this eventful step would take place. If what?
Who authorized for the relocation?
No, this is all at Cabinet's decision. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen of the media.